The ocean takes things without explanation. It hides evidence, erases footprints, and keeps its memories locked beneath the surface. On a winter morning in 1872, a small merchant brigantine was found drifting alone in the vast Atlantic. Sails set, hull afloat, cargo intact, but completely abandoned. No struggle, no sign of collision, no bodies on deck, no distress signals, no drowning, no fire. Her name was Mary Celeste. What happened to the captain, his wife and child, and the crew that sailed with them? The answers vanish like mist on the sea, and for more than a century and a half, their story has remained one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries of the age of sail. In this film, we will go back to the facts, meet the people, trace the ship's strange life, and examine the theories, from the practical to the impossible, that have tried to explain how an ocean-going ship could be found seemingly intact and empty. To understand the mystery, we begin with the ship itself. Launched in 1861 from the shipyards of Nova Scotia as the Amazon, she was a finely built brigantine, sturdy, serviceable, designed for transatlantic freight. She changed hands, as many merchant ships did, and sailed under different names. Her early record was marred by accidents, a collision, a grounding, repairs, and those scrapes left a whisper of bad luck around her. In 1868, she was sold to American owners and renamed Mary Celeste. Under her new master and cleaner decks, she seemed ready for new life. For 4 years, she carried cargo across the North Atlantic: sugar, oil, general merchandise. The ship itself was not extraordinary, but its story would be. The man who would command her upon that fateful voyage was Captain Benjamin Briggs, a stern, devout New Englander, experienced and respected. He was accompanied by his wife, Sarah, and their young daughter, Sophia. Briggs had planned the voyage carefully. The cargo was industrial alcohol bound for Genoa, Italy, a profitable but mundane job. The crew was small but competent, 7 men who knew how to handle canvas and wind. In late October of 1872, the Mary Celeste loaded and prepared to set out from New York. Merchant shipping in the 19th century was a world of contracts, handshakes, and routine danger. There was no radio to call for help, no helicopter to hover above a storm. A captain's judgment mattered. His crew depended on him. Benjamin Briggs chose his people carefully. Among them were experienced sailors, men hardened by ocean weather and long voyages. They had families ashore, hopes and debts, and, most important, knowledge of seamanship. To them, the sea was livelihood, not mystery. On November 5th, 1872, Mary Celeste cleared New York bound for Genoa. Her manifest was full of 42 barrels of denatured alcohol, a volatile but legal cargo, plus other provisions. Her logbook recorded fair weather at the outset and a confident crew. Everything about the departure indicated a normal commercial voyage. In the weeks that followed, the ship sailed southeast across the Atlantic, a common route for merchantmen reaching Mediterranean ports. The weather reports were routine. At times the sea was generous, at others it was choppy and gray, but nothing in the recorded correspondence suggested imminent disaster. Then on that cold morning of December 4th, 1872, a passing British ship, the Dei Gratia, sighted a vessel drifting ahead, alone without sails flapping, and with her flag at half-mast. What they found when they closed was a tableau that would puzzle centuries. Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Gratia spotted the drifting vessel and, per maritime custom, approached. He called out. No answer. The Dei Gratia put a boarding party across. They climbed the Mary Celeste's ladder and crossed her threshold into silence. The first impression of Captain Morehouse and his men was that of ordinary neglect. A ship abandoned in haste, perhaps, but otherwise seaworthy. The lifeboat, one of two, was missing. The ship's rigging and sails were somewhat set, but not in shape to make a disciplined voyage. Inside, pessoal belongings, navigational instruments, and the captain's papers were in order. There were recent cooking utensils on the galley. Foodstuffs were untouched. The declared cargo, industrial alcohol, was present, though some barrels showed signs of leakage or slops. The charts and logs were left behind. The chronometer and other important navigational items were on board. Critically, there was no sign of violence or a struggle. Nothing to indicate a mutiny or pirate attack. Yet nobody was on board. The first reaction in the Dei Gratia was suspicion mixed with buoyant greed. Maritime law allowed salvage claims when a ship was abandoned at sea. Rescuers could claim a portion of the ship and cargo. Practicality required they bring the Mary Celeste into port for adjudication. So they took her in tow and set course for Gibraltar. When the Mary Celeste arrived at Gibraltar, the scene became a spectacle. The British Admiralty and local authorities converged. Newspaper correspondents thrived on the drama. The vessel was examined by naval officers. The sticking questions were blunt. Where was the captain? His wife? The child? The crew? The ship's log told an incomplete story. Captain Briggs's last entry was dated weeks earlier and reported conditions deemed normal. The log did not record a storm so fierce that the crew would abandon ship. The provisions on board were sufficient for weeks. Clothes and personal items remained. Even the captain's watch and the ship's papers were present. The women and children among the general public were unsettled. The image of a child's toy left on a table. Some time later, the dinner table set and undisturbed. These details fueled speculation. Maritime boards convened. The captain of the Dei Gratia and his crew were suspected of wrongdoing by some. Accusations of foul play were thrown. The salvors were interrogated, and the captain and crew of the Mary Celeste were sought, but there were no answers to be had. Gibraltar's authorities recorded testimonies and ultimately made a salvage award to the Dei Gratia crew, a legal formality that would not resolve the deeper puzzle. When you strip away sensational headlines, certain facts remain. The Mary Celeste was found seaworthy, with most belongings intact. Her small boat is missing. Logs and some instruments remained. No clear signs of a physical struggle, and no bodies. It's crucial for any documentary to separate claim from source, rumor from evidence. Over the years, retellings have added lurid details, not supported by the official files. So what can we reliably say? Mary Celeste left New York on November 5th, 1872, bound for Genoa. She carried a crew of 7, plus Captain Briggs, his wife, and their daughter. The Dei Gratia found Mary Celeste adrift on December 4th, 1872, about 400 nautical miles east of the Azores. The ship was seaworthy. Most personal belongings and the ship's papers were intact. The small boat, the ship's longboat, was missing. There was evidence of recent meal preparation. Bread had been baked recently. The bilge showed some alcoholic vapors, and the cargo had been partly damaged by leakage. No bodies were found. These facts remove certain fanciful explanations, like a sudden, monstrous tidal wave that swept everyone away, while leaving real, plausible scenarios on the table. Over 150 years, scholars, sailors, and armchair detectives have proposed hundreds of explanations. Below are the leading theories, evaluated for plausibility and evidence. One straightforward explanation is that weather terrified the crew. A sudden storm or waterspout could have caused a prompt, perceived threat. The captain might have ordered the boat lowered to get clear of the ship to escape a perceived imminent danger. If the small boat was thrown from the ship or swept away, and the ship itself remained afloat, those aboard the rowboat could have been lost at sea. Pros: fits with missing boat and hurried evacuation. Cons: the ship shows no signs of damage consistent with capsizing. Also, abandoning a seaworthy ship without rescue leads to suspicion, but it could be a tragic misjudgment. The Mary Celeste's cargo included industrial alcohol, flammable and prone to vapors. If crew smelled fumes below deck, they might fear fire or explosion. In the dark and panic, they may have cut the boat adrift and abandoned ship temporarily. If they expected to return but could not, the ship would remain intact as found. Pros: explains hurried abandonment and missing boat. Cons: there was no actual explosion or burned hull. The cargo was present. There was no char or scorch marks reported. Some modern writers speculate that alcohol fumes or gas buildup could have caused acute disorientation, headaches, or even hallucinations. The crew, frightened by invisible threat, could have fled into the boat. Again, if that boat separated and was lost, the ship would be found as it was. Pros: invisible hazards can cause irrational behavior. Cons: the physical evidence is mixed. Instruments and some cargo were intact. Severe poisoning would likely leave some signs or odd behavior in the log. Early press and rumors suggested that Captain Morehouse and the Dei Gratia crew plundered the Mary Celeste, then abandoned the survivors. This theory was tested by investigation. No evidence of violence, theft, or cover-up was found. The Dei Gratia crew received a salvage award, but nothing proved criminal intent. Pros: motive for intentional abandonment. Cons: forensic inspection did not support claims of theft or violence. Salvage claims were legal and normal. Another variant combines the cargo with a fear of combustion. If the crew detected fumes and believed fire imminent, They might have lowered the boat for temporary refuge. Once away from the ship, they could have perished in a storm. The Mary Celeste might then drift on, untouched. Pros: matches missing boat and intact ship. Cons: why did they not take warm clothing, navigational tools, or attempt to reboard? Why would they leave valuable items on board? The ocean occasionally produces phenomena: undersea tremors, gas eruptions, odd currents that can cause a ship to behave or sound in terrifying ways. Crew might have sensed cracking timbers or shifting ground beneath the waterline and evacuated. Pros: explains fear without visible surface damage. Cons: lacks direct evidence and remains speculative. Inexperienced seamen, poor judgment under stress, or misreading of natural signs can produce fatal mistakes. If the captain misread conditions, or if a non-skilled crew member caused a minor crisis, the result could be catastrophic. Maritime history records many instances of panic triggering fatal decisions. Pros: a sober, realistic explanation. Cons: Captain Briggs was experienced, and leaving the ship in calm seas seems oddly irrational for such a man. C. Among the most sensational are claims of supernatural interference. These explanations are not supported by empirical data, but they persist in popular imagination. They speak less to the evidence than to the human need to fill gaps with narrative. Pros: captures imagination and explains emotional void. Cons: no academic credibility. Each theory addresses some facts and fails on others, but a pattern emerges. The simplest hypotheses involve a sudden perceived danger, fume, storm, or other, prompting a temporary evacuation by small boat that ended in tragedy. That is the narrative most consistent with an intact vessel and an empty deck. The missing lifeboat is the single physical clue that insists on being central. Every reasonable scenario must account for why a crew would voluntarily abandon a commercially sound ship and take to an open boat with limited shelter and supplies. Why would they leave navigational charts, the captain's watch, and other essential instruments behind? Why would a seasoned sailor sacrifice his best chance of survival, the ship itself? Consider the human mind under threat. Panic is blunt and contagious. When a leader perceives a lethal hazard, his command can transform a calm crew into people making hurried, irrational choices. The captain's decision to abandon might have been based on a momentary certainty, a smell of gas, the sound of structural failure, or a rapidly rising temperature below decks. If he believed the ship would blow up, his choice to get people off at once might appear both rational and devastatingly wrong in hindsight. If they boarded the small boat, the open ocean is unforgiving. Even a small storm can capsize a rowboat. If they were swept away, their bodies would likely never be recovered, lost to currents and deep water. The Mary Celeste would keep drifting, her ropes and sails setting her course slowly until another vessel found her. Beyond theories, there were human beings. Captain Benjamin Briggs was a husband and father. His wife Sarah and daughter Sophia were aboard. Many histories reduce them to names on a manifest. This film insists on the human face. Letters and testimony available at the time paint Briggs as a religious, careful man who thought deeply about moral duty. He had sailed many voyages. He had a reputation to maintain. Why risk everything and leave the ship? Unless he perceived an immediate threat so obvious and irreversible that no hesitation was possible. The thought of a father, in darkness, calling his wife and child into a small boat, hugging them to protect them from imagined catastrophe. It's a haunting image. Many who study this case return to that image and realize the tragedy may be rooted in a single decisive, catastrophic perception. The legal aftermath unfolded at the Admiralty Court in Gibraltar. The salvage claim of the De Gratia was reviewed. Suspicion, rumor, and accusation swirled in the press. Yet the court found no criminal negligence. The salvors received partial salvage rights, but public opinion was not satisfied. Newspapers across Europe and America seized on the drama. Sensational pieces appeared. Playwrights and pamphleteers spun fantasies. The Mary Celeste quickly became legend. That legend then grew and mutated. Each retelling introduced new details, some plausible, many not, and the true shape of the event blurred under myth's weight. Over the decades, researchers returned to original documents, logs, court transcripts, and witness testimony. Skeptical historians sought to correct distortions. They discovered that some early sensationalism was manufactured by newspapers hungry for a mystery story. Reassessments emphasized the likelihood of natural causes and human error behind a tragic miscalculation. In recent decades, forensic reconstructions have suggested that a combination of volatile cargo, shifting weather, and human reaction could plausibly explain the abandonment. Contemporary scholars also emphasize that the Atlantic's currents and depths make the loss of a small open boat unsurprising. If the rowing boat capsized, the ocean would give up no trace. Yet even where empirical explanation seems plausible, the lack of definitive closure, no bodies recovered, no confessions, no diary explaining the evacuation, leaves a gap that rationality cannot fully fill. It is the absence itself that widens the mystery. Mary Celeste has haunted culture. Novels, plays, films, radio dramas, and modern podcasts reference her. She stands as a prototype of the ghost ship myth, a real ship whose true story is so strange that it expands into legend. Maritime writers use the Mary Celeste as a cautionary tale about risk, judgment, and the sea's impartial cruelty. For others, she is metaphor, abandonment, the frailty of human plans against indifferent nature. The ship's final demise, wrecked deliberately by insurance fraud or lost to misadventure near Haiti, only deepened the tragic arc. Her physical end did not end the mystery. If anything, it extended the symbolic life of the story. Documentaries like this aim not to close every door, but to weigh evidence and tell the human truth. The simplest, most consistent explanation is a chain of events. 1. A perceived, credible threat. Perhaps alcohol fumes, perhaps a freak weather event, perhaps a liquid shift. convinced Captain Briggs that immediate evacuation was the safest course. 2. The small boat was launched, and the crew took to it in the dark, under duress. 3. The boat was lost at sea, capsized or swamped, and no survivors remained to return. 4. The Mary Celeste drifted on and was later sighted by the Dei Gratia. This narrative accounts for the intact vessel, the missing boat, the preserved cargo, and the absence of physical violence. It does not satisfy the hunger for a single, dramatic revelation, but it accords with the known facts and human psychology. Even with that reasoned account, the emotional core of the story persists. A family gone, a crew vanished, and a ship that kept on moving, as if waiting for them. The Mary Celeste is no ghost of supernatural agency, but a monument to the sea's indifference and human fallibility. She reminds us that some mysteries are not solved by discovery, but by the act of remembering. Each telling keeps alive the faces of the lost: Captain Briggs, Sarah, Sophia, and the 7 crewmen who sailed into a quiet December morning. In the end, perhaps the sea's only answer is the silence left behind. A silence that invites our imagination, our fear, and our sympathy. If you enjoyed this investigation into one of maritime history's most haunting puzzles, subscribe for more deep dives into real mysteries that history forgot or refused to explain.